I know that this is a challenging time that many are going through right now. And for some, they literally are putting their fertility on hold as many fertility clinics have had to shut down. I wanted you to know that my heart goes out to each and every one of you, and I'm here for any support or questions that you may have. You can email me directly at info@thewholesomelotus.com, and I will answer each and every email that I get. And I'm also offering a free, no strings attached 30-minute consultation. You can find the sign-up link on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com. Episode number 74 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Janie Bowthorpe. Years ago, Janie became a hypothyroid patient, and like millions, she was put on a T4-only medicine like Synthroid and told it would change her life, but it didn't. Janie spent the next 20 years getting worse on nothing but T4 with growing problems, and each doctor she saw said it's not your thyroid causing you all these problems as they did more and more tests. She was steps away from applying for Social Security disability. But Janie didn't buy that it wasn't her thyroid. On her own, she found out about having T4 in her treatment with natural desiccated thyroid. On her own, she found a doctor to let her get on desiccated thyroid, and then on her own, found a second doctor to let her raise it. And her life made a complete and total turnaround. With those experiences under her belt, Janie Bowthorpe started the first and only patient-to-patient movement called Stop the Thyroid Madness. All Janie's experiences challenged the way the medical system has been testing and treating thyroid disease. Today, Janie is the author of 2 life-changing patient-to-patient thyroid books, the editor of a 3rd book contributed by medical professionals, and the owner of the most life-changing website on the treatment of thyroid problems in the world. So Welcome to the podcast, Janie.
Thank you.
After all this, we just had recently talked about, we were trying to talk and I couldn't hear her and then she couldn't hear me, and we finally made it work somehow. So can you share your background, how you began learning and teaching about thyroid health?
My story starts after the birth of my second son, and something strange was happening to me. I just felt weird in the brain, and during the time I was nursing, I think at that first time it was 9 illnesses within a 9-month period. I thought, this is weird. And then I later have a 3rd child, same exact thing. During 8 months of nursing, I'm sick constantly. Both times I end up with pneumonia. And I thought, this is odd. And I thought, well, maybe I need to exercise more, as we hear doctors sometimes say. Mm-hmm. And I became trained to be an exercise professional. And I was teaching classes and I was not recovering well. It was just bizarre. And they finally did the TSH, and we're going to talk about that later because it's the worst test you can do. Mm-hmm. And proclaimed that I was borderline hypothyroid. I wasn't. I know that now. I was very hypothyroid. Mm. And they put me on a Synthroid, which is a common T4 only hypothyroid medication. And I didn't get better. I didn't get better at all. And they switched me about 10 years later to Levoxyl at the time, which is another T4 only medication. I didn't get better. In fact, I got worse. And after 20 years, I was getting so bad, I was getting ready to apply for Social Security disability. And I was really researching on my own because no doctor was proclaiming it was my thyroid. Nobody was getting me well. I was getting worse. So on my own, I did my own research, and I even emailed medical school students, say, what do you think this is? About 9 of them. I found those emails recently. What do you think this is? I was determined. They didn't know. But on my own, I found out about desiccated thyroid, which we're going to have to talk about. Mm-hmm. That is pig thyroid. It's got all 5 hormones that a healthy thyroid would produce. I found a doctor to put me on it. I found a second doctor to let me raise it. And my life made a complete turnaround. So after that, I was mad as hell that I went 20 years with not one doctor saying it was my thyroid. It was the medication that sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so mad that I started the movement called Stop the Thyroid Madness.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's great that you did because it definitely has a lot of great information. I am very curious to learn more. And I have a lot of people, a lot of people can't get pregnant because of thyroid issues, and a lot of people, same as what you're saying, they're taking T4, and actually some people are saying they're developing new symptoms
Mhm.
that they didn't have before, like more hair loss and lighter periods. So I'm really curious to get your perspective on this and hear more about the desiccated thyroid, which I have heard about before. So let's start out with this. We'll start out by talking about the person who is feeling hypothyroid symptoms and goes to the doctor, and the doctor says your lab work came normal, you're within the normal range, you're fine.
Okay, that is one of many reasons why I started a patient-to-patient movement, because doctors didn't get it then, and they don't get it now. Most of the time, doctors are using what's called the TSH,
Mm-hmm.
and the TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. It's a pituitary hormone. It's not even a thyroid hormone. And their premise is that it will start rising to reveal your hypothyroid state,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that the pituitary is releasing it and releasing it and releasing it as a messenger hormone to tell the thyroid, produce, you're not doing a good job. And technically it should be going higher and higher to reveal your hypothyroid state. Well, there's a problem. First of all, there's two problems with that. The first one is there's a certain body of people whose TSH never rises
Mm-hmm.
like it's supposed to if you're hypothyroid. It just stays looking really great.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be one of these who has a great looking TSH, never rising, and you're very hypothyroid, so you get worse.
Mm-hmm.
The second problem with the TSH is the range. Not pharmaceuticals, people who create lab tests, they get volunteers and they test the same thing through all of them. Supposedly they throw out the high one, throw out the low one, and they come up with this range. And they call that normal. If you fall in this range, you're like everybody else and you're
Mm-hmm.
fine. Nope, nope. It's not about falling in an entire range, because some of those people were sick.
Mm-hmm.
It's about where you fall if the TSH rises high enough to reveal it.
Okay. And then so within the TSH, you're saying that some people just their TSH just doesn't raise, but that doesn't mean that there's no issue with the thyroid.
Yeah,
And
just
then what's
right.
that?
There are other ones that will reveal it. There
Okay,
are
so
other ones that will
what
reveal it. Yeah.
tests should people ask for?
Okay, what everybody here should ask for and not be totally dependent upon what the doctor gives you
Mm-hmm.
is the free T3 and the free T4. Now,
Okay.
understand that the T3 and the T4 are 2 of 5 hormones that your thyroid produces. T4 is a storage hormone. It's meant to convert to T3. It's T3
Mm-hmm.
which changes your life.
Right.
And T3 is the active hormone. And we also ask for the free, FREE, in front of both of them, because that's measuring what's available and unbound. If a
Mm-hmm.
doctor gives you the total T3 and the total T4, you're not going to find out what you're able to use. It doesn't
Right.
work for them. Free
Right.
T3, T4.
And then I know that they don't really check for reverse T3,
Uh-uh.
and
It's
that's a whole
important
other
to ask
thing.
for that too, because reverse T3 is an inactive hormone.
Mm-hmm.
That means it does nothing.
Right.
In fact, what it does is make you more hypothyroid the higher it goes.
Right.
So it's also important to find out, is my RT3 going up as well? There are a lot of reasons it will go up. And if it is, it's also going to make you more hypothyroid. Now, let me interject here that, boy, the sun is in my face. I'm trying to move forward to get out of it, but I could probably undo my computer. I'm going to move forward to get out of it.
Okay.
What we learned, because I did a patient-to-patient movement, scoot forward. I did based on what we were seeing repeatedly. And we saw that, for one, with the free T3, that active hormone, people who don't have hypothyroidism, that's usually above mid-range. And we saw this repeatedly over the years. With the free T4, which is the storage hormone, it is also slightly above mid-range when
Mm-hmm.
people don't have a hypothyroid problem. So
Mm-hmm.
you want to see where these are falling. If they're falling below mid-range
Mm-hmm.
and you have symptoms, it's a dead giveaway that you probably have hypothyroidism.
Okay.
The reverse T3, again, that's an inactive hormone. Things that can drive it up are an attack on your thyroid from Hashimoto's disease, inflammation, chronic illness. There's a lot of things that can drive it up. Over exercising can drive it up. And when people don't have an RT3 problem, it's generally the bottom two numbers, sometimes the third from the bottom of any range.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it lays when it falls, when somebody doesn't have high RT3. If it's above those bottom three numbers, you've got an RT3 problem.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And then we talk about taking T4 medications, which is so common. Whether they have whatever type of hypothyroid. Let's actually go back. Let's talk about the different types of thyroid problems.
Okay.
The most common, I feel like hypothyroid is more common than hyper, at least in my business. I see more people coming in for hypothyroid.
Let's talk primarily about hypothyroid, because that's really hyperthyroidism is usually Graves' disease, and for like let's say 80% of the time that's an autoimmune version. I think my mother, who did have Graves' disease, which is hyperthyroidism, didn't have the autoimmune version, but it just means your frees are going to go super high.
Right.
You're in a hyper state, and you can be super skinny, and that can raise your RT3. But the majority of people, especially those that have fertility problems, are in a hypothyroid state, if that's their cause, which is a strong cause. They're not producing enough thyroid hormones. Now, if we look at just hypothyroidism, there are all sorts of causes. I want you to hear that. It's not just one cause. We have somebody out there saying it's all due to EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, but it's not. There's all sorts of causes. A very common cause of becoming hypothyroid is the autoimmune Hashimoto's disease, meaning you have inherited this genetic tendency to develop an attack on your own thyroid by one or two antibodies. You want to do both antibodies, by the way. That's pretty common. Then everything falls underneath it as far as commonness. I think statistics do show that Hashimoto's, the autoimmune version, is the most common cause, but I think they underestimate the non-autoimmune causes. I think it's higher than what they're saying. They're making it a really low percentage. I don't think it's that low. Like with me, I finally figured out that the reason I became hypothyroid, I didn't know it, is the bedroom I was sleeping in, the master bedroom back then, was filled with mold. I knew there was mold in there. I just didn't know it was deadly to my thyroid. I think that's what did it to me. Other people, you can have it from high heavy metals, mold exposure, viruses. Some people have thyroid cancer and it's removed, so they're hypothyroid. I have a list of causes on the Stop the Thyroid Madness website, and the page is called Causes of Hypo. So there's kind of a rundown of all the reasons you could be hypothyroid.
Right. And then now we'll talk about the T4 medication, which seems very common. You go to the doctor, you find out you're hypothyroid, you have the symptoms, and then they check, and it actually comes back within their range, the range that they say. And then the first thing they do is they put you on Synthroid, T4 medication, and then a lot of times people don't really feel that much of a difference.
Okay, let me explain something. Before 1960, if you were hypothyroid, the doctors put you on pig thyroid, giving you all 5 hormones. Now, before it was pig, it was sheep. One of the early ones was sheep thyroid. In fact, the injection was by sheep thyroid in 1890s. But then it moved to pig. I don't know what they knew then, but we know that pig is very compatible with human tissue. So for years and years, people with hypothyroid were put on pig thyroid, and it works. It works beautifully. But then what happened, and I did a lot of research, and it's in the Stop the Thyroid Madness book. There was a shipment of desiccated thyroid that came into the U.S. Right around 1959-ish that didn't have the right whatever in it. It wasn't working. People were taking it, and they were getting worse. And so no pharmaceuticals at the time which produced Synthroid They knew about this, and they took advantage of this amount of desiccated thyroid that came in our country that wasn't what it said it was. It was almost like it was empty. And they started promoting a new and modern way to treat hypothyroidism. And that is just with T4. Remember that T4 is simply a storage hormone to convert to T3. And they pushed and pushed. And most doctors, moved to it. They were giving their patients this new and modern way, one of 5 hormones. And there was a doctor named Dr. David Derry from Canada, Derry. I think he's since passed away. He started noticing in his patients that it wasn't working well. He noticed it. He paid attention, unlike most other doctors back then. So, and then you have the fact that the pharmaceutical, which I think now is Abbott, that makes Synthroid, they heavily promote Synthroid in medical schools. They give a lot of money to medical schools. So here you have all these doctors who go to medical school, and that's all they hear. Synthroid. And there are other versions of Synthroid. There's levothyroxine, Unithroid, Levoxyl. There's other versions. It's the same thing. It is nothing but a storage hormone. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't work. Now, I know there are some people who do better than others. They're out there on T4. I feel fine, and I believe them. But you have to evaluate what is fine. When you really talk to T4 users, those that are saying they feel fine do seem to have a few or a lot of symptoms related to a poor treatment. The body is not meant to live for conversion to T3 alone. And the longer, even those who feel great, which children generally feel pretty good on T4, a lot of them at first, but the longer you stay on it, the more symptoms creep up that are related to a poor treatment. So it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's interesting. So desiccated thyroid and T3. Desiccated thyroid has all the hormones of the thyroid. And what are the ways that you can get it? Is it only prescription? Because I know that they have glandulars in certain companies.
We need to bring up something at this point. Desiccated thyroid was always a great product. And we usually got it by prescription. There are also some over-the-counter bovine, which is cow, NDTs made. So there are over-the-counter versions, and there's prescription versions. But I never would have guessed in a million years, in my 17th year of doing what I do, and now's my 18th year, that I would be saying to you, desiccated thyroid has gone south. Something went wrong with most all the brands. We're not sure what has happened. We saw, for example, there's one called Armour, which has been around a long time, Armour bacon and stuff, ham. It was always wonderful and consistent. It worked well. We could let it dissolve under our tongue. And beginning in 2009, it started having problems. And then it had them again in 2012. It had them again in 2015. It's like they change things. The pharmaceuticals change things and don't understand that it makes it less effective. But today it's kind of working, but every other one has fallen. Natrothyroid went south. They started going south in 2018. That's by RLC Labs. They also RLC makes WP thyroid, which is desiccated thyroid. It has now gone south. That means we're seeing way too many people not doing well on them anymore. There was a version that has been around called N as in Nancy, P as in Paul, NP thyroid. That came out in 2010 by Acela, just like the old Armour. It was wonderful. It has royally gone south as of 2019. It was causing burning in the stomach, burning in the esophagus, and a huge return of hypothyroidism. There's even a Canadian version of desiccated thyroid made by IRFA that may work for some people, but there's an awful lot of people it doesn't. So what I'm leading up to is desiccated thyroid has always been wonderful, but you need to be careful if you're going to move to it. Right now, based on what we observe, the only one that seems to consistently be working still for most people is Armour. It's
Okay.
way expensive now. They jack the price way up. A lot of people can't afford it very well. It's the only one. There are people that feel that the others are working, but we're seeing evidence that it's going to backfire.
Okay.
So what we're doing today is, if you can find a working desiccated thyroid like Armor, some compounders are able to get a working source, some are not, or the over the counter. It's a great product. You just need to get optimal. If you don't want to risk that, a lot of us are feeling, I mean, me, the desiccated thyroid queen, is feeling hesitant. We're getting tired of going through all these changes. So another option is T4 with T3,
Mm-hmm.
getting optimal.
Okay, so T4 with T3. So combine something like Synthroid with a T3 medication.
And, get,
Or what's that?
and getting optimal.
Okay, got it. And what about something like I'm sure you check this out. Standard Process has a lot of glandulars.
I want to say that you have to be careful with the glandulars. Now, remember I said bovine desiccated thyroid?
Yes.
There are some brand names that have been around a while that do seem to work most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like Thyrovans is kind of new in the over-the-counter. There's Nutrimeds, which has been around a long time and does seem to be working. They're using New Zealand grass-fed cows. And then there's Thyrogold, which has been around a while. It's had some bad batches. I'm going to warn you about that. I hope that Tammy, who has created it with her husband, Dr. John C. Lowe, will fix those. They kind of work. But when you move to, I can't remember if Standard Process is one, there are some companies, supplement companies, that have been making glandulars.
Mm-hmm.
They're using the thyroid gland, but the mistake they make is they add other ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
So as you are raising a glandular, which is like desiccated thyroid kind of, as you're raising that to find your optimal dose, you're also raising every single thing in there. I mean, some people have spleen. I forgot what, like maybe liver tissue in there and spleen tissue and vitamins. And you're raising all those and you may not need those risen.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what you use, you got to be careful of whatever they've added to it, because you may not need to be raising those.
Got it. So if you need like a higher dose, and they add other things, you're kind of increasing everything else
Yeah.
along with it.
There's a problem. For example, if they add, there's one product out there that adds liver tissue. That's
Mm-hmm.
a glandular. But the problem, and so when you're raising the glandular, thyroid glandular, to find your optimal dose, you're also raising the liver.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what liver's high in? Copper.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're raising your copper levels, and you don't need to be doing that.
Right.
So the risk.
Something to think about for sure. So what if somebody does suspect having thyroid issues? Go to the doctor and check not only TSH, but T3, T4.
Free T3 and free T4.
Free T3, free T4. Yeah, to see what's available.
And RT3.
Okay.
And then you've got
now, will they do that as easily to do RT3? Because I feel like it's not as common and it's not as done.
Now you know another reason why I started Stop the Thyroid Madness, because it's a crapshoot. You know, doctors are not trained right. I'm not saying all of them, so don't anybody get offended, but a lot of them have high egos. They are condescending. They don't think we know what we're talking about, but we had to know what we're talking about to get well. We didn't get well because doctors knew what they were doing. We got well because we got together, which is the movement I started, and we learned from each other. So it's a crapshoot, but every person who thinks they're hypothyroid, you've got to go in there informed, which is why I created Stop the Thyroid Madness, the website and the books. Mm-hmm. And you've got to be clear what you want. Mm-hmm. I want the free T3. I do not want, I want the free T4. I do not want the total. I want the RT3. Yes, I want the RT3. If you want to do the TSH, that's okay right now, but we're not going to go by the TSH. It's a pituitary hormone. And you will either get a doctor says, okay, or you're going to get one, then you don't need to be at my practice. And our attitude is, fine, I don't want to be in your practice if you can't do the right labs.
Right. Yeah, definitely something that you want to be informed about for sure. Do you talk about also nutrition and certain foods that people should avoid? I know especially for autoimmune conditions such as Hashimoto's, a lot of times removing gluten, soy, corn, a lot of times because they tend to cause an an allergic response.
Well,
That's
it's not just an allergy.
and it's also phytoestrogens.
There's so much, there's a push whether you're hypothyroid or not to eat better.
Yeah.
So that's great. But when you have an autoimmune version of thyroid disease like Hashimoto's,
Mm-hmm.
it seems like a larger percentage of those with Hashimoto's have problems with certain foods than
Right.
those who don't have Hashimoto's. It doesn't mean that those who don't have Hashis may not have a problem with certain foods, but it
Right.
seems like the percentage higher with Hashis. So
Yeah.
what are those foods? Please remember it's individual. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot say all Hashis patients should remove this, this, and this, and this. That's not true. It does appear the majority do need to remove gluten because gluten is very similar to thyroid cells and it makes the antibodies go higher.
Mm-hmm.
So the majority are removing gluten.
Right.
Next in line is individual. Sugar can cause people's antibodies to go up. You mentioned corn, but it's not as common as sugar. Dairy is a huge one,
Right.
but you got to see if it's you. If that's moving antibodies up.
Right. So like elimination diet, see how you feel.
It's not just allergies. I mean, it's just a bad reaction causing the antibodies to go up. And I let patients guide some of the information in the book Hashimoto's Taming the Beast, which just came out last year, about all those different foods and what kind of reactions they have. So you can say, well, I don't have any of those, but under this category, man, I had 3 of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I mean, elimination diet, it seems to be the gold standard these days because really you can't tell. I mean, yeah, they're like you said, it seems to be something that tends to be creating it worse or people do better without. So if that's the case, you might as well try it and
Yeah.
see how you feel.
Yeah, and so for some people, it's pretty obvious. Like I did a coaching call with this guy, and he said at Christmas time he decided to eat the things that he wasn't eating all the other times. He has Hashis. He
Mm-hmm.
ate dairy, he ate sugar, and he felt horrible.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times there's a good clue that, whoops, I shouldn't be on that food. And if you have Hashis and you react to those foods, guess what? Antibodies go up.
Yeah, definitely. So, how can people find you if somebody wants to work with you, get more information? I know that you have books out. Can you share all of that with us?
Well, we'll start with the website. I decided by December of 2005, I started in 2002, but in 2005, I thought time to create a website because what we were learning was in a Yahoo group that was, it started before Facebook. It's time to do that. And I've been adding to that website since 2005.
Mm-hmm.
What
Wow.
we've learned, I've been adding details. It's
Mm-hmm.
a patient-to-patient website, very detailed. It's so big that some people prefer the book. You have 3 books. You have Stop the Thyroid Madness, the updated revision that just came out last year. It's got a blue-gray background and a perfect image of a woman with her fists up. She's got black hair and her fists in the air. Stop the Thyroid Madness. It's got a lot of updates from the previous version of what we have learned. That's important. The second one also came out last year, and it's called Hashimoto's Taming the Beast. It's got a woman, a girl facing like a polar bear, and she's sticking her tongue out at the polar bear. And again, I did it patient to patient. There's some information that's just for you. General, here's what Hashi's about. Here's what goes on. But then I've got chapters specifically about what patients over the years have learned about their Hashimoto's, about foods, about what they need to do. So that's the second one. In between those was a second one. I say was, it still is. I found some doctors that knew some good information. And so they did the chapters. So that's also worthy, especially the chapter on why we get low cortisol. Fertility. Are we wanting to connect it to fertility?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, when you are hypothyroid, no matter the cause, for one, your whole system slows down. And that doesn't help you with pregnancy. But the second thing is that all of these issues are part of the endocrine system, the thyroid, the adrenals, and sex hormones. It's like a symphony. And if you go, they all work together. And if you go to a real symphony and the tuba players are not playing and the violin's not playing, it kind of messes up the whole symphony, and it might influence the clarinet players. And that's a simplified example, but that's why with some women, sex hormones go very wonky. And a lot of women, not all, because I didn't have trouble getting pregnant, but a lot of women do have trouble getting pregnant when they're hypothyroid. And because of that interaction between all the endocrine system. And when these women optimally treat their hypothyroidism, and sometimes that starts out with T4, but we really need T3, they can get pregnant. So if anybody's having trouble with getting pregnant or having trouble with your periods in general, time to look at your thyroid to get the right tests, free T3, free T4, RT3. Don't let a doctor just do TSH and T4. Then when you get those results back, go to the lab values page on STEM, Stop the Thyroid Madness. That page, lab values page, shows you here's where people fall who don't have a problem. And you can compare where you are with where you should be. And then you'll find out where your problems are. And I also have a lab values card now too.
And you also, it's interesting. We, as Chinese medicine physicians, we look at the yin and the yang, and hypothyroid is a yang deficiency. Yang is heat, and we need yang in order to conceive. We need that heat. So it's kind of an interesting perspective on it.
Yes, that fits.
What I was going to ask you, I was going to say, you seem to also keep up with Armor and all the desiccated thyroid medicine or medications out there. Do you update that on your website?
Yes. Usually my updates are in my blog post, and you will see a September blog post called The Sad Saga of Thyroid, meaning how most of the NDTs started being problematic, where Armor was the one that still kind of works. I'm always trying to update through the blog post. The book, I haven't done it yet, but I will have a page that updates you if you're going through the book. And I mentioned it at the beginning of the book.
So how do people follow that? Do you have a newsletter, something that reminds them or lets them know when you have a new blog out?
You can sign up for email notifications for the blog post, meaning that you will actually get the actual blog post in an email. And so you can read what I'm saying. You can sign up at the bottom of the Stop the Thyroid Madness website to get email versions of the blog post. You just have to remember that if you want to comment on the blog post that you see in the email, you don't do reply. You click on the title and go to the website, and then there's comments underneath. But that's mainly how I communicate the latest things that are happening.
Okay, great.
The blog posts and your notifications.
Awesome. Well, you seem to be such a huge patient advocate, and I appreciate all your information. I love your passion, and you're like a walking thyroid encyclopedia. So it's awesome.
I have 18 years of listening to patients.
Yeah. So thank you for your passion. Thank you so much for coming on. I apologize again for the technical difficulties. This was a great episode, and all the episodes will, whatever we spoke about, all the links, they're all going to be found. They all could be found in the episode notes if anybody wants to go there. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.